Hi, before the video begins, I've got a quick stop press announcement for you. In the video that follows, you'll see that each time I want to open a LUT, I navigate manually through my computer's file system to find the folder where I've got them stored and then load them one by one as needed. Well, in the time between when I made the video and when you actually get to see it, the folks at Affinity have brought out their new content sync function, and that means that any content that you get from the Affinity Content Store is available directly in the app itself. So you don't have to worry about remembering where you've saved things, you don't have to worry about organizing your folders, and of course it means that if you have a hard drive failure, everything's backed up and you can just download it again. If I'd known that when I was making the video, it would probably be about 5 minutes shorter. Hi, and welcome to another Affinity Creative Sessions. My name is Ivan Weiss and I'm a headshot and portrait photographer based in London. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe and the notifications bell below so that you're always up to date when new content is added to this channel. Today we're going to look at LUTs, lookup tables. If you've not used them before, a lookup table is essentially a set of instructions for your image editing program, in this case Affinity Photo, to modify the colors in your image. It's not the same as a simple HSL or selective color adjustment. It's far more complex than that, and it's a really powerful way to modify colors so that you can apply a very similar look across a whole set of images, or you can use different LUTs to create many different looks from one image. It's entirely up to you. Below this video, there's a link to the Affinity Store where you can go and buy a set of 40 LUTs that I've created based on the color grading that I use in my images. There are 36 color LUTs and 4 black and white LUTs. I'm not going to go through and showcase all 40 of them in this video. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you how you can use them and some creative ways that you can apply them to get a variety of results and start creating images with color that you really like. So with that said, let's jump in and start playing around with some color. Perhaps the simplest way to use a LUT is to use it as is, that is straight out of the box. The way that we do that is that we go down here to our adjustments and we scroll down to find LUT, which opens this dialog box. From here, we're going to go to the folder where we've got the LUTs. We're going to go into the bonus folder and look for the LUT that was created from this original image, which is LUT table. And we'll select that, hit open, and there it is, it's applied. So this is before and this is after. Now, in almost all cases, you're going to want to apply some kind of finishing just to get the image where you want. The easiest way to do this is to open a levels command, and we're just going to move the black level to where we want it and do the same with the white level. Yeah, that looks about right there. And maybe just a small adjustment of the gamma, the midpoint, just to soften that up a little bit. That looks good. And there we have it. Simple. Now, what if we want to do something a little more complicated? Well, first things first. By adding this layer here, what I've done is I've modified the output of the LUT. We can call that a post-LUT adjustment. I'm just going to zoom into this area here of her hair, and you can see that with this adjustment, we've just barely retained the detail in the shadow areas here. It's there, it's just slight. But what happens if we move that levels adjustment and put it below the LUT? So I'm just going to move that down, and you can now see that that's blocked up all of those shadows. So we can call that a pre-LUT adjustment. I've modified the input rather than modifying the output. Now, this is not to my taste, not particularly keen on it, so I'm going to get rid of that and move it back to being a post-LUT adjustment by putting it on top. You can, of course, do that with any other kind of adjustment. Now, another simple way that we can modify a LUT adjustment, if we go in here and open, let's go into the main pack, and we're going to look for Donya. Let's select that. And we can see we've got a nice strong effect here. Maybe it's too strong for my taste. So quite simply, I'm going to go to the opacity slider, and we're just going to take that down. If I put it at 0, we've got no effect. As I bring it back up, we've got increasingly more effect. Let's put it at 50% for now. And then again, I'm going to go and open a levels layer and just finish up by pulling my white and black sliders to where I want them. So again, that's a very simple way to just modify the output that you're getting from the LUT. Okay, so we've looked at pre and post adjustments, and we've looked at the opacity slider. Let's do something a bit more complicated now. We're going to open another LUT. Let's go in and select, I think we'll go with this one called Emica, and we'll apply that. Click open. That's nice. But then I'm going to go up here to my blend ranges. Click on there, and we're going to modify the way that it's applied to the image. So if I pull this slider down, now the LUT is being applied to the shadows, less to the midsection, and not to the highlights. I can, of course, add some points to this and make a more detailed selection of how it's applied. So let's go ahead and just pull that midpoint over, and you can see that changing. And we'll just bump it up a little in the shadows. If we uncheck linear, Affinity will smooth that curve out for us nicely. We just want to add a little extra point there, so it's all nice and gentle transitions. And there we have the LUT applied mostly to the shadows and not to the highlights. Now, if I add another LUT layer, you can probably guess what's coming. Let's go for Emily version 2. We're going to open this up. That's now being applied to the whole image, but if I open the blend options again and pull down the shadows, it's now being applied from the midtones up to the highlights, but not very much in the shadows. And again, I can just modify that and uncheck linear, and there we have it. So we've got two different LUTs in combination. One of them is being applied to the shadows. That's the original image. That's with the shadows, and then with the highlights from a different LUT. Okay, let's look at another way that we can selectively apply the LUT to our image. Let's open another LUT layer, and we're going to look for the LUT that's called Emily. There we go. Open that up, and that gives us a nice overall effect. Now, what if I decide that I don't like the way it's affecting the top left of the image here, but I do like the way that it's affecting the rest? Well, I can open my gradient tool, and I'm going to click on a point down here at the bottom right, and just drag up to set my gradient. That's good. Then I'm going to go in and find the midpoint slider and just adjust how much of that effect is coming in. I'll put it just somewhere here in her hair. And then, of course, I can still grab the endpoint and modify the angle at which that gradient is coming in so that it fits with the image. Something like that is good. Maybe move that in a little bit and just pull down the midpoint slider to somewhere here. So now I've got the effect that's being applied only to the bottom right of the image and partially to the middle and not at all to the top left. I could, of course, if I wanted to, apply a different LUT to the top left and do the opposite gradient if I wanted to. Okay, let's go for a slightly more complex way of applying the LUT selectively to parts of the image. And the way that we're going to do that is we'll go over here to our selection brush tool, and we're just going to make a selection around our subject. So we just draw over like so, just clean up those edges a little bit, And then we're going to use the refine button up here, and then the matte brush just to clean up those difficult areas around the edges of the hair, some of the sharper edges around our subject. And we've got this selection. With that checked, we're going to go and open a LUT layer, and let's choose a different one. If we go into a mirror, I like this one. We'll open that up. And now we have a LUT that is applied only to our subject. Now, I'm going to go up to Selection and invert the selection that I've got, invert pixel selection. And then I'm going to open another LUT layer and choose a different LUT to apply here. Let's go for Tara Gold, and this is going to apply to the background. So now I have one LUT on the background and one LUT on the subject. We don't need the marching ants. Let's just switch those off and on again so you can see what's happening. And of course now I have independent control of these two LUTs, one on my subject and one on my background. I can use the opacity sliders independently to vary the amount, vary the strength of the LUT that's being applied to the different parts of the image. And then again, let's just finish that off with a levels command so that it looks the way we want it. Just adjust that midpoint. That looks good. Now, let's do something slightly more complicated. So far we've been applying all of the LUTs in normal blend mode, but there are of course many ways that you can apply a LUT using the different blend options that you've got in Affinity. So let's go and open a different LUT. For this one, let me see. If we go in and choose this Venus, this black and white LUT, you'll see that that gives me, as you'd expect, a nice strong contrasty black and white image. But if I change the blend mode from normal to, let's say, color, this is now affecting only the color of the image. And with a black and white LUT, there is no color information. So it's just giving me a grayscale, just a simple grayscale version of the same image. But what if I change the color blend mode into something else? Let's go for luminosity. Now the LUT is affecting the luminosity of the image, but not the color. So even though it's a black and white LUT, it's still a color image. Now, why would you do this? Let's look at changing this LUT to a color LUT. And we're going to go for, let's see, let's go with the Donya LUT again, because I quite like this one. That's in luminosity mode at the moment. Let's change it to normal so that you can see the full effect of the LUT. And then we're going to go back and change it to luminosity. So now it's only affecting the contrast, the luminosity of the image, not the color. But I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that layer. And on the lower layer of the pair, I'm going to change the blend mode to color. So now I have one layer that's controlling the color and one layer that's controlling the luminosity. And together, they're the same as having a single LUT layer in normal blend mode. But because they're on separate layers, I can now go in and change independently how much it's affecting the luminosity and how much it's affecting the color. So this gives me very fine control over how the LUT is applied to my image. And of course it's possible, if we want to change one of those LUTs so that we end up, let's pick this one, Diana, it's just got a different color to it. We have one LUT controlling the color and a different LUT controlling the luminosity. And that way I get to combine and create a unique effect by using two different LUTs in two different blend modes. I hope you found that useful and it's given you some ideas to play with. The name of the game is experimentation, so feel free to take all of those techniques, combine them, and add your own to come up with something really unique. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the link to the Affinity Store where you can find my pack of LUTs along with a ton of great content from creators around the world that you can use on your images.